Welcome to the World United. Welcome to the World United.
So, welcome to the panel discussion. We are going to be discussing management of inner self and to integrate the spiritual quotient for business firms to establish them to have a more value-based and ethical outcome. I'd like to just also welcome the other people that have joined us in the wings, and I trust that you're enjoying the presentation as well. And I'm going to pass over to Dr. Lee to lead the first panel question, if you will be so kind, lovely lady.
Right. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, panelists. What a scintillating conversation from a soul energy point of view to business. And that's the density, right? That's the densest, one of the densest parts of our incarnation on the planet is business and money and ego dynamics and a lot of conflict zone areas that we need to enter to evolve. So I thank you, all three of you, for bringing this lovely, refreshing spiritual views on our interaction. So this is much needed, and I hope all of you have great success in going out into the businesses. Now, as a counselor myself, I have actually counseled CEOs and managers on their emotional issues, especially their home issues, and where they bring their evolution to businesses. So I know there's a lot of conflicts, right, in businesses, and we experience that in ourselves, in our own interaction. So I pose this to all three of you to bring the scenarios from the beautiful spiritual value-based and ethical-based ideals to the real life. So how do you deal with your clients in the scenario of ego dynamics, lots of conflict, backstabbing, and differences of views? How do you bring that with your philosophy? Number one, with ego dynamics. Number two, with dwindling bottom lines, let's say, which brings up a lot of stress in a business, failing as it seems to be on a financial level. So two scenarios that I would invite you panelists to address with the ideals of spiritual, sustainable businesses. Please, whoever would like to start first.
I can start. Something funny happened when you spoke of backstabbing and ego dynamics. Like it almost like physically hurt my body to hear that. Yes. I mean, I know exactly what you mean, and I've been there in big corporations and even in a fast-growing startup where it was already much freer and we were making our own rules, but also there all kinds of ego dynamics were going on. And it was, for me, almost 1.5 years ago. It was actually the moment that I got divorced from my now ex-wife. I told myself, okay, I'm going to live in full surrender from now on. So when you talk about the management of the inner self, for me, it's a funny term because who wants to be the manager? That's not the inner self. So I realized the whole trick is to just let go of everything, and whatever you think of it, it doesn't matter because the thinker is not you. And that's when I decided that I only want to surround myself with people who uplift my energy, who raise my vibration. And I'm in the privileged position that I run my own business and that I can choose who I surround myself with. So for me, it's very simple. When there's ego dynamics that are taking energy away, that are costing, I just steer away from it, and they're just not in my world. And that's what Win Mastermind is about. Only awesome people there who have passed these egoic impulses to want to be right or to want to explain yourself, at least to a certain extent. So I find myself in safe space, and I find that unleashes so much energy for creation that just anyone who isn't there yet, sorry, there's no space for them in my life.
Okay, so that's how Alexander deals with it. So Owen and Jana?
Ladies first.
Yes, if you want to. For me, it has a lot to do with making the first step yourself first, being kind of an example, right? So I often talk about self-revelation as well, because it's a huge aspect concerning ego dynamics, that you need to take off the shield and the armor of work life and be aware of where to, but in general, be able to let people know if you struggle, if you're overwhelmed, or where you need support or something. And so that's something that I do myself as well. When I work with people, with clients, with colleagues, and I don't do it everywhere and all the time, don't get me wrong, because this has to be a conscious choice as well, right? But I let people know that my profession comes from failing, and that I learned from vulnerability, right? When Michelle said, I don't doubt that you're a good change manager, it was important to me to say, I learned from failing in there, because that's where it came from. So, because most people, interestingly enough, if I work with them, they don't have a problem with me saying, well, I doubt that, or I don't have the answer yet. Can we work on that together? Or it's just given a different impulse for them, right? And it opens them up to do in similar ways. And I sometimes, when we get into the discussion and in counseling, I even refer to, well, you don't see me weak when I say so. Why do you see yourself weak when you think about saying, opening up that? That's the way I do. And of course, I get to know people that don't resonate with that. That's where I refer to something my big sister once said to me: everyone stands where he stands, he or she. And if that person is on a different level of awareness, I can offer that gate to step through. I can offer that inspiration. If that person is not there yet, it's not up to me to force that person. It's about free will, right? Sometimes it takes a little longer and then they get there, and some don't. Some well don't resonate with me, with my way, with my approach. Then it's like Alexander said, let them go. They will find a different way. But in the end, they will get there anyway, but not yet.
I think, Jana, it's very important. Sorry, Owen. It's very important to honour where everyone is at on their own individual journeys.
Yeah. And also, like if you're a counselor and you have your clients who are absolutely bent on their positions, I'd like to know is that how do you maneuver that to turn that around? Or does one then, if let's say if the business is to the point of collapsing, does it close and you start again? And you as a counselor holding the space for your clients, what would your strategy be from your inner self too, and the suggestions that you might offer? So perhaps then, this might clarify the issues, because we of course all sit and witness all this going on, and we might be able to rise above it. But the people who are struggling, in businesses with ego dynamics and in a failing business on a financial level, that's very real to them and also to us. So where do we come from an idealistic point of view, and how to deal with their issues so that they can continue their businesses so to the best of its intent? So you can just open up the spectrum of the scenarios, because then we make it real. And I think Owen would be very cogent in addressing this. And of course, we can all jump in at any point to comment. Owen, please.
Yeah, I think that's again the challenge of being the third one. But there are two things that straight away comes to mind. A word that Wei Ching used called idealistic. Was that the one that you used? And an example that Jana used earlier on about getting from point A to point B. the thing is that we tend to have this idea that for a new workplace to be spiritual, to be more abundant focus, we have to have a 180-degree change to where we are right now. And that unnecessarily will give us a lot of resistance. But there are two examples I can give you on this. One is back about 8 to 10 years ago, there was a very good book that was coming out. A lot of people were pushing for this, which is called 101 Degrees. Water does not boil at 100 degrees Celsius. Water boils at 101 degrees. And the change into the state from liquid to steam is a 1 degree change. It's the same example that Anthony Robbins uses in his workshop, talking about 2 degree change, where he goes into a lengthy story, which is about 2-3 hours. But basically, the biggest change to a human being is not to take massive steps first. It's just taking that 1 or 2 degree change from where you are, and that takes you to an entirely new tangent. So an example for this is that if I was running a business, I would not talk to them about holistic approach and stuff like that, but I would suggest to them, maybe it would be wise to move from a focus that is very profit driven to a focus that's very impact driven. Now, in order for you to have an impact, you still need the profit, but now you have something greater than the profit because your people are involved, your systems are involved, and all your resources is now moving towards creating bigger impact. And once you get there, you realize you're so streamlined, profit is no longer an issue. So that's the part where we talk about idealistic. And what came to mind earlier on from Jana is about the getting from point A to point B, and you can't get there unless you know where you are. You're never going to get to the other point. And from my from my school days, I was in the Boy Scouts. And when we started learning about how to read maps, they were always, I remember my very first lesson because I was made to run labs and I was made to do pumping on the spot because I gave the wrong answer. And the question was, how many points are there in a map? And every one of us, I was so brand new, we talk about the 4 points, north, south, east, and west. And every time I went up and gave them a wrong answer, they would make me do pumping on the spot for another 10 times, 20 times. They would make me run a lap around the school and come back. And they keep asking me, how many points are there to a map? And each time I would come up with 4 and I'll still be getting the wrong one, 3, and I'll get... And finally, after many repetitions, I discovered from another senior scout who thought that I've had enough. And he says that there are 5 points. And I was wondering, how do you have 5 points in a compass that's north, south, east, and west? And he says that the most important is the 5th point, which is, where are you in the map? Because if you don't know where you are in the map, you can never figure out if you're facing north, south, east, or west. So that was probably one of the strongest lesson I remember from my scout days, and I've been using that into my work with companies, because their 5th point is exactly where they are today. They're profit driven. They only look at it from a point of very limited resources. They're looking at it as, I need to answer to my shareholders. Yeah, so they are at a point where their 5th point is not in an ideal position. If we can take that 1 or 2 degree change and get them to realign their 5th point, you can see that their tangent will go off into something that is totally unimaginable for them at this moment.
Thank you,
I
Owen.
would like to add to that, Owen, because I really like that analogy or the picture, because if you know where you stand, you normally you also get aware of the pain that you have where you stand, right? You're not in the perfect position, as you said. And I'm not referring to my clients in a spiritual way, but I let them know about talking about where that pain comes from. And if you go into that depth, you automatically get to points where it is about people or about purpose or about the lack of purpose. Always. You always get there. And I don't have to put out the whole idea of spirituality. If you talk with the people about the root of their issues, of the pain, like, for example, employees coming and leaving, employees being frustrated, customers not being satisfied, though there has been huge effort in something, then you always get to the point that people lack purpose, that people lack sense or whatever, for example. And this is how I started with a big department to work on their new purpose, vision, and mission, because it came from that point of pain, right? And it's me. I'm only asking the questions. And if people get aware of, I don't have an answer to that kind of an important question. Like if I ask the question of, so what makes your employee being sad about the wonderful system that he developed? Well, it's because our customers don't use it. So how does that come? And then they get to the point of, well, I don't have an answer, but there must be a lack in communication. Well, fair enough. So let's have a look at the lack of communication closer, and we'll get there. And the lack of communication always is something that has to do with connection between people. And there we are again in spirituality, right? So I'm not talking about spirituality too much.
Yeah, I hear you fully, Jana, and I agree. I think we also need a definition of the word spirituality.
Yes.
Which is why I consciously stop using the word spirituality, because it conjures up an image in a corporate world which immediately raises resistance. I used to have that 4 wheels as physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And I realized I was hitting so much walls that I have to actually spend time unnecessarily explaining that. But once I went, I changed the word from spiritual to energetic. I realized I don't actually have that resistance anymore. They don't see that as oh no, this is something that we need to stay away from. So I think I now use spirituality as an all-encompassing word that means to me all the 4 wheels are properly inflated, properly maintained, and they're all running at its optimum. That's when you get into a spiritual state.
Well, thank you so much for being willing to deep dive into the nitty-gritty of the business world. And that's our role, isn't it? I mean, that's Michelle and my role as moderators to take you and to take us there. So if we can even deep dive even more to the everyday situation of a business and its difficulties, because you are a wealth of information and inspiration for people, especially even in this realm of spirituality, to actually monetize their businesses. And that's a very difficult thing for many healers or yoga teachers and counselors to move into. I think that's one of the most difficult transition, to take that value-based commitment, into the world of density, into all these structures, and then now with technical structures and so on. So thank you for being willing to deep dive and offer your inspiration and your insights into this. So anytime you have something else to deep dive, please come forth. And perhaps my co-moderator, Michelle, you have a question or
I do.
Just before that question, Michelle, if you allow me to give you an example that Wai Ching brought up, I think the monetization and the value of it is actually very, very simple. Take, for example, you have 3 colleagues who sit right next to each other, and 2 of them work very well together. The third person is not. Now, if we just leave them as it is, most of the time, the person that's left out is working at a reduced productivity rate. The other two can be working well together, but because they spend so much time chit-chatting, their overall productivity comes down too. If they have a practice where they are allowed to now come to know each other without the egoic self, some form of breathing exercises or some form of space where they are allowed to just drop their nature that they think they're supposed to have, you realize that the three of them starts communicating. You realize that the gossips and the time spent at the water cooler, the cigarette breaks and all those things, immediately that actually reduces. Productivity actually goes up. Work actually gets done faster. I personally have seen this because I worked with a group of 4 to 5 ladies in the admin side. And this is circumventing around the last organization that I was with. So this is totally on me. I invited them to join me for meditation once a week in one of the spare rooms that we had. And their productivity and their evaluation score for that period of time I was with them, it improved. So it is as simple as that. It can be monetized.
Yeah, Owen, what you're saying reminds me of, I work with purpose-driven entrepreneurs. My community called Win Mastermind, purpose-driven entrepreneurs come together to help each other with their businesses. And this is one of the main things. I find that many people who have embraced spirituality sometimes have negative beliefs themselves against money, started to see it as a dirty thing. And I think a big part of it is to also embrace money for what it is. It's a means to an end. And what people mostly struggle with is what you just exactly did, Owen, is to explain the value of a purpose-driven product or service, because it is purpose-driven, so there is more impact. So inherently, there's always more value. That's often more linked to the long term. So the ability to explain that and explain how that value exchange works and why it's a good investment, I think that is where the biggest area for improvement is.
I agree, Alexander. I was about to call you out then and you jumped in, and I'm glad you did, because we're hearing about, and we've spoken about the problems, but I know that we also, amongst us, have a variety of solutions. And during your discussion, you mentioned a couple of things that really highlighted. You spoke passionately about radical honesty, which is so important. If we're to move forward, we have to have that, and we have to be able to be honest with ourselves and with our colleagues and with our staff, with everyone, management included. It's vital. And you spoke about the intuitive intelligence, and I loved that concept of people coming with a concept that they already believe in. They're selling it to you, so they believe in it. And for a panel to be able to sit back and intuitively tune in, I'd love to hear more about that. And equally with Jana and Owen, I'd love to hear more about what we've got to look forward to when we actually enable businesses, or business are enabled to become more value-based and focusing on ethics. And the triple bottom line comes in here too, because we've got to include our planet.
Thank you, Michelle, for bringing this up. In the dynamics inside GaiaNet, I see this use of radical honesty and intuitive intelligence as one of our main superpowers as a team. I think the new paradigm way of thinking about business and collaboration is that we're all one. We're all one team. We're all connected, and we each bring a vital piece of the puzzle to the table. None of us has the entire puzzle, not even close. And from that realization, a lot of space opens up to just be and let our authentic selves come forth to fulfill this divine mission that we're here to do. So while we're on this journey of having these these special meetings. It's all holocratic style, sociocratic style, a little bit with our own twist. Owen, you referred to certain practices or organizational habits before. For example, one thing we do with every meeting is we always start with a personal check-in. And the personal check-in is just about what's alive in you right now. What's your energy level like? What are you feeling? Which version of Alexander is arriving in this meeting today? Without knowing that, how are we going to have a useful discussion? So that's one of those practices. The second one I already mentioned is constantly voicing our tensions. When there's no tension, there's flow. Flow is a goal. With these simple practices, we also remind ourselves to constantly tune our attention inward. And we learn to understand that each of our contributions is unique. And each of our contributions is true. If it's true for us, our body, our intuitive intelligence, then it's our duty to put that piece of information on the table and look at it together, objectively. So not only does it help to get more greater outcomes in meetings, spark creativity, fine-tune good ideas into great ideas, it goes hand in hand with this inner journey that we're all going through, this inner journey of presence, of okayness, of neutrality. And so it's these type of habits that I believe, and they say one size doesn't fit all. Well, screw that. Everybody needs to do this. Radical honesty, voicing tensions, non-violent communication, conscious conflict resolution. These are the basic skills of the decade. Every organization needs to be able to establish teamwork at a level that we are capable as humanity.
Thank you, Alexander. I completely agree. Jana, did you have something to add?
Yes, I would like to add on what Alexander said, because for what he said, one of the most significant basics is a culture of trust, right? Because you need to be aware of, you can speak out what you think, you can speak about your tensions, and you're not going to be called out for that in a negative way, but that it's appreciated, right? And therefore, you're again at the point of, how can you gain trust if you don't behave trustworthy? And behaving trustworthy has very, very different levels, but start on your own in your own backyard in a way, for everyone in there. And management has the job to cultivate a ground where people can practice that and can start to train that. And by saying start to train it or to improve it means baby steps, right? But it is a vital part of management to make that possible, to bring that up and to make that baby steps possible, to help people to try that out. Because if you, and trusting does not mean that you're always of the same opinion. It does not mean that that you have to be friends with everyone, but you respect each other. Yeah. There are, like, you don't judge each other, non-judgmental. That's a huge thing in our companies. Yes. It's about letting the person be the way it is, and the piece that person brings to the table has a value, whether it is an idea, an inspiration, or attention, right? This piece is valuable. There is a lot of value in there. And I also want to add that this is one point about scarcity belief system again. If you look at people that feel enough with the one piece that they bring to that table and not the whole answer, That's a completely different discussion, besides a discussion where everyone says, I have that one solution and that's the only right or wrong one, right? And that's what a lot of people think they expect from themselves, and they also think they are expected to bring to the table. You don't get to a common solution if you're not able to say, this is my part and this is my part. If one says, this is the solution, no, this is the solution, then you will always clash that way, right? And that's what companies do that since ages. Like, look at companies that have production and sales, for example. There needs to be discussion. And what Alexander says, talking about tight things and opening up about, well, critical stuff. But it doesn't mean that the one is right or the other is not, right? Everybody brings something to the table here. We're not yet used to improve or to work from there. That's something that companies need to improve as well. But that, again, is part of scarcity, right? If you are aware of that, with the one piece you bring to the table, you are enough. You open up a completely different discussion because it's not fear-based. And what we currently do in the world, and this really, really, I must say, it's sick. The current way of running business is built on scarcity, because the marketing always says you're not enough, you need this, you need that. So there is a lot of scarcity that you send out there, but it's a catch-22, because you yourself can say, I'm not doing this with my employees, I'm just sending it out there. Well, guess whose marketing is reaching your employees? The scarcity marketing of another company. And so scarcity is coming in at least through the back door anyway, right?
Right. Thank you, Jana. That really touches a raw nerve, you know, just trust is really key. And interestingly enough, the Latin genesis for the word trust is moneta. And that's the base for money as well. Isn't it interesting? So money, in God we trust, you know, and all that. And so that sort of weaves together in a business, because essentially a business is to make money, profit, right? And now we're just trying to integrate all the value-based, ethical values and soul points to businesses that are just driven by profit. So in trust, it's also money and trusting that there's no scarcity, there's abundance. So that really is a beautiful insight, and how to develop more trust in people, that they can trust in the management, especially because oftentimes it's the management that brings in the sabotage by, you know, right? And so you know that scenario very well, where they would even take sides and clicking in. That's where it gets very, very mucky in a business when it becomes like that. And that's where people like you, who are going in there into the war zone to try and purify it, and then to try to spiritualize or energize the business world. So thank you so much, all of you, for being these spiritual warriors into this battlefield.
I may be touching on another raw nerve, but there's this joke about two highly spiritually awakened individuals at a cafe in let's just say Ubud in Bali. And they were both discussing about one topic or another, and you could just hear each one of them starting each sentence that intuitively I feel this. And the response from the other person would say, yes, my intuition tells me this. And every other sentence starts or has the word intuition or intuitively, you know, guiding a conversation that never ends. I'm going to propose that there is a more useful way to define intuition, at least for the workplace. I define intuition as a combination of information plus experience, but built on a foundation of trust. Because I can have all the information and I can have all the experience, but if I do not trust the person sitting next to me, it will never come true. It will never take place. So you have to have that trust that both Alexander and Jana has been suggesting.
that has to first be there, because no matter what kind of information you get, and we know we don't get complete, but even if you have as much information as we have, and the person has as much experience as he or she brings to the table, if that trust is not there, we can forget about profit, we can forget about impact, we can forget about the planet, nothing will move.
Oh, true. And we're almost trying, but I almost want to deep dive even more because, you know, I actually had a holistic spa and creative healing center in Ubud. Interesting you should say that, Owen. And Owen and I have never... Disclaimer here. So, and yet, you know, it's a holistic spa and creative healing center, very impactful, very idealistic. And yet there were issues on trust because the investor who I trusted started getting a little bit too dogmatic and authoritarian. And basically, I let it die. I chose, right? So I was involved, I was the one in charge of the concept, the training, and the people, the hiring, everything, and the menu. So I chose to let it go, let it close, right? So that is also idealistic. So in the beginning, we have the trust. And what happens when it starts to dwindle? If that person holding the money says, I put in the money, so I get to say everything. So that's an interesting scenario that I also bring up. I don't know how much time we have, but you know, that this kind of thing, the reality that I had to learn, you know, with a spiritual business that's meant to have sustainability and impact. So that's my learning curve. And that's what I bring to this questioning as well. If we have a few more moments, Michelle.
I just have a question for you, if I may. Wei Ching, did you have an instinct that there was something wrong with this business?
Yes, I did.
Yes, you did.
Later on, not in the beginning. So later on, which is when we have to step up with the radical honesty that Alexander spoke about. You know, so I was just trusting the situation that it would resolve itself. So that's what I've learned is this radical honesty. So in my next one, I'm just going to grab them there and really speak there. So and so that was a huge lesson. And this panel is very interesting for that lesson, that teaching from that into business. So yes, Owen, you have something.
If I can just very quickly give a simple example. Now, if it's all about perspective. Mm-hmm. If we look at a circle, if we look from the top down, it starts from one point, it goes around, and then it completes when it meets the starting point. That's a circle, yeah? And we will say lesson is learned. We have learned the lesson that we need to learn from this experience, etc. Mm-hmm. Now, if you actually move from the top down to the profile, if you're looking at it from the side, you realize that oftentimes it's actually not flat, but it's a spiral and it goes up. And I realized that with businesses, when I talk to them, the challenge for me is not so much to get them to learn. The challenge is for me to show them that they need to look from the profile. If they change their perspective of looking at things, lessons that seems to be right or wrong, which I think we covered in this panel, it's no longer an issue of what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad. We now can see that we are able to build on this, and the spiral just keeps going upwards. You know, each time there is a challenge, there's a difficult choice point, radical honesty, all these tools are here, creative leadership, building a base of intuition, actually helps the person to move on to the next higher spiral. And as it moves upwards, it gathers momentum and speed that after a while, it becomes natural for them. But it's always a cycle that we just keep to continuously look at and not fall back and say, oh, everything is fine and good right now, and we can just leave it as it is.
It's excellent, Owen, that it is indeed a spiral for soul evolution. All these external experiences are actually just for soul evolution, each individually and collectively. So very well put. Thank you for bringing that cherry on top in this discussion. Michelle?
I would just like to add, Wei Cheng, because you said what happens when the trust is gone, that has maybe been there, and then things start to change. it's about getting to the point where fear took over, to understand where the fear comes from. Because if trust is missing, it's because there is fear around something, right? And I have been, for example, working with business leaders that have been colleagues and friends for long years. But within that time, here and there and here and there, trust was kind of broken in small ways, and it add up, and the fear inside of them became that huge that they were mistrustive to each other, of not being able to have each other's back anymore, but they could not open up about it. There was the first thing, like saying, I fear I don't trust you because I fear some things. So they needed someone for them to understand their fears with them. And therefore, it's, for example, very, very important to look at the different aspects of trust. That's a different panel, because it's huge. It's just not a word, it has different aspects. But find out where in the aspect of truth, of trust, are your issues with that other person, and to find someone that helps you opening up to the other one, and the other way around. Why that's where business counseling comes in. A lot of people don't understand what counseling in business is about. Like, and it's, you help people to build the bridge to talk about the struggles and the fears, and in a non-judgmental way. And from there, reconnect. Sometimes you don't, so then you can also go apart. That's fair, but you can also reconnect and go on from there again.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you.
Yes.
That's so important.
You know, Jana, what you have just described is not just about business. It's just about everything in life, in relationships, in my own spiritual journey. It's always that dialogue that keeps going around, being honest, truthful. Do I trust myself? Can I trust my partner? I think that's when one thing fails, everything just falls apart. It is very precarious, but I think that's why we are here today in this forum, inviting people to step up. You know, let's not be complacent with just what is out there. We need to step up to create for ourselves the kind of environment we want to live in, work in, whether we want to be always at loggerheads and challenging each other, or do we want to work together as one, as we say, with the world united. We always want to look for that. It's a constant invitation for us to keep stepping up in that way.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, everybody. And to my brand new brothers and sisters, what a delightful, inspiring, invigorating, extraordinary few hours. I am so, so delighted we got to spend this time together. On behalf of the World United, I'd like to share a beautiful certificate of appreciation with you all. And I'm hoping I'm sharing. The certificate is for all of our speakers for the World United, and we proudly present it to Alexander, to Jana, and to Owen. It has been, thank you. It has been such a joy, and I would like to complete our time together, if I may, with a beautiful prayer in gratitude. We have created a ripple, which I really trust will become a tsunami with thought leaders and business owners and pioneers like yourselves moving into this space of spirituality. And may we spread this light everywhere we go. Every person we touch touches another, and so on and so on. And it is a beautiful thing when we make that choice to step in and change the world and make it a much more beautiful and better place. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your hearts, and your passions. Alexander, we all expect an invitation to your city of light on sacred ground.
To that.
Dr. Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you, Jana, Owen, and Alexander, for willing to deep dive. That's my job, right? Take us there.
It is.
It was a huge pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much.
A pleasure. And
Yes. Yes.
go in peace, my friends. Love to all. Thank you to all who joined us, who are listening. And if you would like to reach out to any of us at any point in time, we are here to serve.
All the best.
Namaste.